I've always had a lot of trouble trying to define what U.S. Maple sounds like.
You know, we're all definitely inspired by classic rock.
I've always said that we're a rock and roll band. You know, obviously we're not like Foghat. People say that we take rock and roll, that we've taken rock and roll and deconstructed it.
Those guys have been living with deconstructionism for years before I was in the group.
I didn't always disagree with the term as much as maybe other bandmates did.
Is there such a thing?
We're trying to, construct things differently. But I would think of that as just constructing things differently. We're still constructive.
I've never known where that term means and have no interest in following up on it. Seriously.
There's a thing about audiences where they want to be satisfied. They want to have their expectations fulfilled. U.S. Maple, but more than any other band, refuses to fulfill that expectation. Just forces people to contend with them doing what they do.
That was a big part of it, actually, is this shared confusion.
Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberger channel. The strange music show diving into the weird and wonderful world of music and pretty much anything it has to offer, right? So in today's episode, we're in for a very woozy and wonky episode, right? We're of course returning to the randomiser, which has churned out this very odd suggestion indeed. So on our video for Music Not for Airports by Salinechka, user Doomsday Dance Party made a bunch of suggestions, including this very one we're looking at today, US Maple, which is without a doubt one of the weirdest and balmiest things I think I have ever been introduced to. Now, considering this one was also produced by none other than Michael Gira of Swans, I'm actually surprised that not more of you have actually recommended this album, but then again, maybe this one actually isn't on your radar for some reason. Who knows? Anyway, today I'm going to present Talker by US Maple. So of course, let's ask ourselves, who are US Maple? Well, US Maple is an American band from Chicago formed in 1995, consisting of members Al Johnson on lead vocals, Mark Shippey on guitar, Pat Sampson on drums, and Todd Rittman also on guitars as well. There is no bass guitar in this band. That is something that's very weird and kind of cool about this band. Anyway, first formed in 95, this was a band formed by members of the bands Shorty and the Murkier Players, after members began discussing how the group could erase rock and roll from their collective minds. With this as their blueprint, the band was formed, creating this form of experimental noise rock that completely eschews any traditional form, and instead just does its own thing entirely. The guitarist just seemed to play around these melodies, formed from odd chord structures to thinly strewn guitar lines, whilst the drummer just places all the beats wherever he sees fit, as Al Johnson just wheezes away, his vocals strained he has expresses these very inaccessible lyrics that nobody seems to have figured out yet. Anyway, today we are of course talking about Talker, the band's third studio album, which was released on Drag City in 1999, and as mentioned, was produced by the one and only Michael Gira of Swans. And this album sees US Maple just offering their trademark style, producing one of the most enigmatic yet fascinating albums I think I've heard. Truly amazing, so let's dive in. So to start this off, we get Bumps and Guys. You get the most strangled guitar tone noodling along the length of the guitar itself, playing God knows what, before a second guitar introduces itself with seemingly all of the wrong notes, I guess you could say. Wrong. Everything has started off completely off kilter and so awkwardly, as though a semblance of music is attempting to form out of the darkness. A drum suddenly throws it all further off course though, when it eschews the tradition of beginning the beat and instead just starts a run-up, a rhythmic pounding that throws it all into overdrive before a sudden descent into the song begins. And you get a moody low end from the guitar just playing these two notes, which kind of emulates this kind of bass perhaps, as you got the continued strangling guitar tones playing all the parts situated between the melody, and some distortion and fuzz attempting to come through it all. It uses everything in such a wonky and awkward fashion, with even the vocals coming in far too late it feels. Like the incredible wheezing and almost guttural whisper that sounds a little bit reminiscent to me of Greg Dooley of the Afghan Wings, if he smoked maybe 20 cigars and downed the entire bottle of whiskey before performing the vocals. Maybe Greg Dooley meets Captain Beefhart perhaps. Maybe. And what is Al saying here? I have no idea. He just wheezily punts his way through the lyrics, barely making them audible in the mix. And I don't know why, but this sounds like the wrong way to be making music, but I am completely here for it. Like, I remember when I first heard this song, prior to writing up my thoughts about it, I was just completely blown away by the complete disregard for conventions and formats of traditional music. Even in rock music, you know, and instead of letting them, they just let them play whatever the hell it is they feel like playing. A band truly dedicated to doing their own thing entirely. It results in something so bizarre and strange, like something like that is almost like the Shaggs at times, with its complete strangulation of the instruments, you know, squeezing, the grip further and further around their necks until the notes become these garble-strained calamity of barely held together melodies. But I think there's also something brilliant about it as well, because you've kind of got this weird sort of almost Don Caballero type thing, of this very weird rigid structures that is holding it all together in this odd framework. Like, I don't understand what US Maple are doing. There's this incredibly weird style of non-music that just works incredibly well for some reason. Truly fascinating, but as an opening song, this works as a fantastic way to just start off the entire proceedings to showcase exactly how this album is going to play out for us. Our next track of Running from Kebab. You've got a tapping of the drumsticks and a few awkwardly placed guitar notes here, before the drum starts off this very lazy beats of sorts. And you think this might turn into a semblance of an actual song, but then everything once again comes in at all the wrong times. Sour notes strangled by the guitar, this vocal that comes in so oddly, and it's all just so nonsensical. But I kind of adore this one, because you've kind of got this sudden stab of electric guitar following the first few words of each verse. It's kind of like kind of weird thing that I don't know how to describe properly. But there's something oddly joyous and brilliant about it. So confusingly placed in amongst this composition that refuses to follow the rules of convention. Like, I'm not sure why, but I think this actually might be one of my favourites. You know, the drums sound almost jazzy in the mix of this composition, and the guitars just esoterically play whatever the hell they feel like playing, noodling up and down the frets and playing whatever notes they think they can fit in, well, anywhere basically. And I once again have no idea what Al is singing about here, what he is telling us in the vocal delivery. Like, it's weird, when he sings, you do get certain instances of phrase and words come through, but it never paints this whole picture. You just have this odd fuzzy image of everything going ahead, and you just don't really know what to make sense of. But I like what he's doing though, because he pulls some very interesting sort of melodies in with those lyrics. But yeah, after a completely off-kilter opener with the first track, this one just further pushes the incredibly abstract, esoteric nature that the album itself is going to be providing, suggesting, you know, the best course of action for something like this is to just strap yourself in and be taken along the strange musical journey itself. So, our next track of Go to Bruises. This one, we get the drums, guitar, and another guitar playing around some very chunky bent chords, it feels. It almost sounds like an actual strong song structure to begin with, until it all falls out to let the guitars play this really incredibly unusual interplay with each other. Two guitar players both playing with and against each other in this weird battle of pure weirdness that creates a brilliant moment of just strangeness. And then the vocals begin, of course, and it's just, how did we get here? Like, this one just pushed itself so long, so bizarrely and so oddly, and yet I can't stop listening to this one and just wanting to know what the hell are they going to do next. And what do they do? In this one, they kind of just play the same thing, but with a little bit more intensity following this weird drum fill that comes in out of nowhere, it feels. Like, it's very bizarre, but I cannot help but to be in complete awe and amaze of how wacky and nonsensical this entire album is sounding. Nothing within it sounds right, and yet it is without a doubt some of the most interesting music I think I've ever heard, even though it's so difficult to actually listen to in a weird way. Moving along, we get more horror. This one kind of opens up with a traditional drum beat, or traditional, that introduces the scene before a bouncy bass line from the low end of guitar lets the other guitar just do their weird noodling once more. More esoterically organised songs, Weird, but I have to, in terms of writing about these songs, it kind of dawns on me at this point on the album, that all the songs have been specifically arranged to sound exactly like this. From my understanding, part of the ethos of the band was to completely eschew the traditions of rock music and make whatever the hell this is, right? And I think there's something very cool about that, though. You really get a sense when listening to US Maple that this is a band that want to do their own thing entirely, and it doesn't matter if an audience is going to understand it or not, because regardless of that, they're still doing their own thing. They're doing it in their way. And it just makes for some of the weirdest things, because you just find yourself going like, no, it shouldn't go this way, and yet it does, and you're kind of oddly fascinated by it. Like, to go back to this song, it kind of just stumbles around so strangely, especially when the vocals do eventually start, and it feels like another battle between all of the instruments attempting to throw it further and further into abstraction, it seems. Just do the weirdest thing that fights against the structure of the song. And especially those drums that seem to throw the tempo completely off, though. Like, it's just so wacky. Like, it just builds and builds into pure chaotic noise that then fades into silence, letting the vocals take centre stage for some moments before moving into this weird noodly section once again. And it baffles me because I find myself being completely bombarded by the abstract noise whenever I'm listening to this album or these songs. Completely incomprehensible as the band just plays whatever they want to. But I think it's all brilliant, especially this one, because it finds time to throw in these wonderful little grooves that are completely buried within the composition. And it kind of amazes me because they are one of the coolest parts to listen to, but they are thrown so few and far between each other. Like, you've got faint glimmers that are not the crux of the song at all. And I think there's something fascinating about that, even though it makes no sense to me. The point is, it makes sense to them what they're doing. Our next track of Apollo, Don't You Crust. What does that even mean? I don't know. Brilliant stuff. The drum starts this one off, awkwardly stumbling around the kit as the guitars come in with this very peculiar array of chords and twangs, like the raising of an eyebrow, as you observe someone do things completely incorrectly, but with complete confidence. Complete assurance that they're doing it correctly. A weird opener to this song, before we then get the urgency for one of the guitars emulating that bass once again in a way that is very uncomfortably backed up by the drums, in a way that also feels like it isn't actually truly backing it up, as the guitars do that brilliant noodle once more. An abstract strangulation of the notes, once more, giving it this weird sense of urgency, like it's all trying to speed up and rush away, basically. But the vocal delivery is another slow wheezer once again. Same as it ever was, Same attempts to express the lyrics, whatever the hell those are once again. But I like this one the more it all progresses though, the stranger it all becomes. Like, it never answers any questions, but instead throws it all further and further into that abstraction once more, coming up with new interesting soundscape as a result of just the way they all play together. That form of eschewing traditional formats and structure, whatever this is. No, it's so weird because the complete confidence in playing the songs this way makes it very fascinating to hear. Like, US Maple's music seems to just awkwardly stumble and fall at every step, completely unable to support itself as the effects of alcohol take over and intoxicate melodies into these boozy, drunken, chaotic moments of pure madness. But the assurance of it is truly brilliant. And there's something so amazing about presenting music like this. Like, it's difficult to wrap your head around, but I know I'm enjoying it when I listen to it. Even though it makes no sense to me, as it just devolves into pure madness the more it all progresses. Truly brilliant, though. Moving along, we get Breeze. It's Your High School. So this one opens up with such an uncomfortable twang from the guitar before the abstract noodling is accompanied by a flurry of hits across the drum kit. Very jazzy almost, attempting to support it with the structural integrity of sticks and twigs perhaps. One small breeze and it's all going to come falling down in a spectacular fashion, right? But once again, there's kind of a sense of chaotic urgency to this one, especially when the guitar plays this weird progression of chords travelling up and down the entire neck of it. And it all bounces around so brilliantly, creating just another wonky track that once again is delightfully heavy in some respects, with the guitars once again playing all of the wrong notes in such an amazing, beautiful way. I like this one because it's a bit of a head nodder, like standing in the back of the room as the band performs, nodding along to that weird sort of guitar line, even though it's at a very weird slow pace. But it's all oddly chunky, I have to say, this track, one that is unforgiving with its structure as it just pushes its way along, Midway through though, we actually get a little bit of a change to this one, because it seems that everything, including the vocals, just seems to devolve into disorganised chaos, into nonsense, into mania, as even the energy is completely lost by the entire band. A struggle to keep the momentum going as it all just filters off to leave the drums and one of the guitars to do this nice little ending section. A moody instrumental that actually plays on for a really nice amount of time, guiding the chaos of the track into something that's very weirdly lulling, kind of lazy in a weird way, but in that sort of weird, cool US Maple way. Once again, a definite favourite of mine. This one just is truly brilliant for what it's doing. Next track of Stupid Deep Indoors. Weird abstraction of singular guitar notes to open this one up. Quiet and unassuming, but we should know better by now. We should know to expect trouble by this point. And yet when the flurry of guitar notes come in, rushing the composition along, you feel like it's building up, but it leads to nowhere at first. The drums barely supporting it all, creating this odd clashing vibe, but then the vocals come in, and in a really weird way, we're back in familiar territory once again, at least familiar in context of this band and this album. This one is very cool though, because you've got the vocals being this refrain of get out, get out, get off, and it's one of the few moments I can actually hear and understand what he's saying. But I love how he's just delivering it though. He's just like, get out, get out. So strangled, so strained and weird. But it pushes the abstraction of this song so delightfully, giving a semblance of structure in amongst the disorder and chaos perhaps. And I find it's definitely another one of my favourites, because it makes no sense that the instrumentals once again do whatever they want. But there is some wonderful performances from them all. Some wonderful little intermittent moments where they display some lovely craft, be it the roll across the drums, or the semblance of melody that is forced out of the guitar. So bizarre because it once again is so strangled, uncomfortable, so impossibly organised in terms of how it's all sounding, and yet so brilliant for being exactly what it is and nothing else. Truly brilliant. And this one is brilliant because it ends with this anticipating drum roll that just builds and builds and builds, just a drum roll that's leading it into a section just for it all to go nowhere entirely. Just completely fading out into the silence at the end, leaving us wondering why the hell did they even do that? Who knows? But this is part of their craft though, doing things the way they want to do it, And in a weird way, with our expectations of rock and roll music and what things should sound like in terms of the traditional formats of it all, it's very funny how they play on that expectation and lead you into these really weird moments as a result of it all. Very fascinating, very cool. We end up with the penultimate track though, Untitled. A weird creaking of guitar notes clattering against each other as the drum beat just flies in underneath of the entire thing, before a glide of one of the other guitars plays a very moody low end again. Maybe anyway. It kind of throws everything off, and before long that drum pattern just starts to fall apart, throwing in a weird little flare as it fills just to keep everything off course once more. Very weird, as the drums is so oddly consistent on this one, yet it still feels completely unconventional. And it lets the song open up though, very bizarrely, creating spaces for some weird droning elements that I swear we have not heard on this album up to this point. And it creates for us one of the most unique sonic experiences that when it comes to this album, especially when the instruments fade off to let those drones just occupy the scene for a little bit, pushing it all into a weird hazy section of peculiarities, of strange intoxication and unawareness of time and place. I think it is perhaps one of the weirdest things of this album, as it seems to even eschew the unconventional nature of US Maple. Like, it's very weird to think about, and it does hurt my head the more I think about it, but like, you've got this weird contrast of playing against norms and expectations, when it comes to US Maple's music, especially to the formats of rock music or rock music. And then on this one, by this point on the album, you're kind of used to how US Maple are doing things, if that makes sense. And then this one seems to just throw that out the window and say, actually, you're not prepared for everything we have. Like, we can do whatever we want with it. And I think it's truly brilliant. Like, it just adds in more confusion and, chaos to everything. It just makes it hurt your head even more. But I just adore how they do it though, because you just never know what to expect and you're just constantly held in anticipation despite all the weirdness that is occurring. Very bizarre stuff. So yeah, moving on to the album's final track, So Long Bonus. So this, I think, is a brilliant track within US Maple's repertoire. A perfect way to end up this incredibly strange, bizarre array of tracks across this entire album, right? Opening up with a twang of notes, the drums come in to back this one up, only to find everyone has started doing their own thing once again. And nobody is with each other, it feels. But in spite of that, I love how it all sounds though. Especially the bend of notes on the guitar that pulls so brilliantly on it, as the vocals have this wonderful storytelling quality that I just cannot comprehend or fathom. Wheezing gasps and calls out into the void left behind by those instrumentals. Like, I once again love the confidence of it all, because the band just seems to completely devolve into pure nonsensical madness and chaos, letting the dirge arrive in the form of distortion at times. And I love how it all feels like the members of the band are playing their own songs entirely, and as bizarrely as it sounds, it weirdly enough makes sense in context of what they're doing as a band. In a weird way, the sense of it makes no sense. How bizarre. But it ends this album on a truly lovely note, I find. A kind of weird country jangle from the guitar and the vocals, though once again all the wrong notes being played from the guitars here. And it just ends everything as it all began though, making you wonder, what the hell have we just experienced? What is this thing? Like, my goodness, I do not know what to make of this album. I adore this. I think this is truly brilliant, but it also just baffles me. Like, it's weird, because I think this is, I've heard this a fair few times since it was first suggested by the randomiser, but I find this one to be so wonderfully unclassifiable. Kind of like this middle ground between so many experimental bands, because you kind of got this almost proto-math rock style that's intertwined into this noise rock style. But it all results in something that's very wonderfully avant-garde. Now, you kind of have elements of the Shaggs and Captain Beefhart in terms of how you're structuring the music, perhaps. But, in a weird way, you then have this kind of math rock thing where it's actually very specifically structured, kind of like that Don Caballero thing once again, where it's very specifically structured in this way. But then the style of it all is just so not anything, and I don't know, I just can't really put my finger on it. Like, all I know is this band just does whatever the hell they want to do. And I think there is something wonderful and brilliant about that. Like, Talker is one of the strangest albums I think I've ever heard here. Nothing my mind can make sense of and or comprehend. But all I know is I'm just fascinated by the entire experience. An album that just proceeds along, carrying itself with these broken, barely held together instrumentals that hold the semblances of structure deep within those very wonky, scratchy layers. One of the weirdest things I've been introduced to, and the kind of thing that I think just speaks for itself really, which makes the entire video moot, but it was requested on the randomiser, here we are discussing it. But I just adore it for being what it is, and nothing more. These dudes just happy playing their own style, just playing rock and roll in this weird deconstructed way until they're left with the parts that they think is interesting. held up by PVA glue, sellotape, and bare hands just long enough for everyone to witness before it all just crumbles under their own weight. Truly amazing and wholly unique, I feel. No, and I should say, actually, it's actually quite interesting saying that it's a deconstruction, because I saw a little interview with them as well, and they don't think they're deconstructing, but actually rather construct things from the groundwork from which they start with, which is probably a better way to describe it, but whatever they're doing, it's brilliant. I should actually say, I can actually kind of see why Michael Gira ended up producing this one, though. The dude has always been interested in the fringes of music, the outliers well beyond the norms, where unique individuals did their own thing entirely. And no one else seems to do it quite like US Maple, right? And thus, I think it's the exact kind of thing he'd find interesting enough to produce. His style definitely works quite nicely here as well, though, capturing what makes each song unique in its own right, and more importantly highlighting the uniqueness of this band across the length of the entire album. This is actually something he did a lot in his curation of material for Young God Records that I discovered in Sacrifice and Transcendence, which I have now finally finished reading. When reading it, it seemed that his ethos was to find the uniqueness of of certain acts and present that, and draw that out when he was producing these bands. And I feel like he's done a wonderful job of it here, because this is just truly US Maple and nothing else really. Truly brilliant. An album that is so phenomenally inaccessible, yet so fascinating with those interested in hearing anything that is off the beaten track, right? For better or for worse, nothing else quite sounds like this, but I know I adore it. I truly do. So I think with that, we will come to the end of our episode of Weird Music then. I'm very glad to have finally find time to talk about US Maple. As mentioned, I had listened to this a few times since it was first suggested and found it to be one of the most weirdest and incomprehensible album experience I've ever come across. Glad to have finally found a sort of way to express that very weird experience of this album to you all watching today. So yeah, huge thanks to Doomsday Dance Party for the suggestion of this one, truly deserving of being classified as weird music, no doubt, right? Still can't put my finger on it, but yep, this is an album that truly fascinates me, I have to say. I mean, you could describe it as anything, I think I made a lot of references to Captain Beefhart and Don Caballero, but I think anybody is going to describe it as anything, perhaps, because it's just completely its own unique thing. But yes, a phenomenal suggestion, so a huge thank you for this one. If you've watched up this far, I'd like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. Remember to make suggestions in the comments below for future episodes. At the end of every month, we let the randomiser randomly pick your suggestion. So you might see it by next month, you might see it in a year. Who knows? It's completely random. With that, I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.